Okay, we're back from part 1. This will be part 2. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how to use your Baofeng radio. Once you've got everything programmed, the first thing we're going to do is
channel mode.
Turn it on. And we're going to go through the different portions of what you're going to use on this radio for typical use. Now that we've got it programmed, I'm going to show you the coordination between what you saw on the screen and what we're going to use on our radios. The first step we're going to teach you is this little key down here in the corner. That is the keyboard lock, and it is associated with the little icon right there. It's a key. So we're going to unlock it.
Unlock.
And that allows us to use the keyboard in order to do whatever changes or modifications that we want to the menus. Most of the time you're going to want to keep this keyboard locked, because if you carry this thing on your side or on your belt or however you carry it, you don't want to be inadvertently pushing buttons that could possibly change a setting. So once you've got the keyboard unlocked and you're wanting to adjust something, we now have the next step of looking at the different two channels. You've got the AB button right here that will switch between these two channels. They can each
1 4 1 5
be changed when it's unlocked. The up down arrows here allow you to change the frequencies.
1 6 1 7 1 6 1 5.
Okay, so that was for the A frequency, and this little triangle right here will let you know whether you're switching the frequencies or the channels for the A frequency or the B frequency. So you have it up there.
2 0 2 1 2 0 1 9.
And it also indicates which one you're actually monitoring. So you have the ability to have both of these set, but only be monitoring the one that has the arrow. Typically, I leave my radio on the upper frequency, and then I have another frequency that I'll set that I wish to listen to. There is a menu that allows you to dual channel watch, which means you can watch both frequencies via the monitoring of the radio. So you could have it set for the frequency that you use the most, and then also be monitoring a secondary emergency frequency or another frequency that may be with another group or another friend. So you could listen to two different conversations or have two different conversations at once. Now, currently we have it in channel mode, and that's switched between
Frequency mode.
that
Channel mode.
and that with this button. So channel mode and frequency mode are going to be how you display what you're looking at. Considering that there's a tremendous amount of numbers in each frequency, and memorizing them usually only occurs if you're a ham license and you get to turning the dial on a ham radio, or you get very familiar with these different channels. Most people are going to probably want to go with a channel name. Now, how that works is back here on our file we have the name right here, and that's what's being displayed. And then we have the frequency right here, and that is what's displayed if you're in frequency mode. So I prefer channel mode. And then you will also see, and it's kind of difficult, let me get down in here. Whoops. Turn
Frequency
that
mode.
light back on. Right here in the upper corner, and I'm having a hard time with the light, but
Channel mode.
there it is. The 15, that channel, and the one below it is going to correspond with the 15 right here. GMRS1, there's the frequency, and there's the channel. So that is your settings of what channel you are going to be using. Now, we know that we can watch either or, and in the menu there is a menu called Dual Standby, which will allow you to watch both of them. But you're going to set this for your common frequency. We use that in this area, that GMRS1. So let's now go through some of these menus. Okay, let's work through some of these menus. And the first thing we're going to do is say, for the most part, the standard settings that come with this are going to be appropriate for most uses. For those who have special needs, you will modify some of these settings based on those needs. Work with somebody who is an experienced ham for using the settings on this, but for most of the non-licensed individuals who use this, you're going to stick with the public frequencies as we discussed in the first part, and you'll only really need to use the basics of this radio for most of your operations at this time. So let's take a look at a few things. Like I said, you're going to leave your upper channel set to the A for whatever channel or frequency you and your family or community use. Typically that's where I leave it. The channel is there, and then of course you have your battery indicator up here as that icon. Your menu button is here, and we will go through the menus, and these are your selector buttons to go through whatever channels or options, up or down. Okay, we're going to restart here. Guess the battery life in the camera has to last, so we had to recharge it. So let's start over start in now with our menus. And as I said, we will use the menu button to begin.
Menu.
It replies menu, and the first one is squelch, and we'll look at the book here, and the first one is squelch. So when you go to change it,
Menu.
you'll use the up or down key to change your menu, and then when you want to adjust a menu,
Squelch.
move the little indicator down that says this is what you're going to be changing, and then you can change your squelch setting. So that's how you change your menu and then change the setting in the menu. So we will talk through instead of going through each one of those. Once you've set your setting on your menu the way you want, you hit
Confirm.
menu button again, and it moves the arrow upwards to confirm your new selection. So we're going to go through the different menus as to what is needed or not, and which ones you're going to be concerned with for your basic usage. So we're going to look through the book on this one, and as you see, we've got squelch is the first one. The available settings are 0 through 9, 0 being the most sensitive and 9 being the most insensitive, or the most filtering of noise. For those of you who've ever used a CB radio, you had a squelch on it, and you'll know that it allowed for a more sensitive signal to be picked up, and you can change the sensitivity with the squelch. Typical setting of 3 works really well. The next menu is the step, and if you're using frequency mode as to how you're dialing up your frequency, and there are several options there, we won't be using that. Number 2 is the transmit power setting, and you have the option for high or low. Your FRS frequencies are supposed to be using the low, and the GMRS can use the low or the high, based on what the rules are. However, that's a setting that can be changed. Save, battery save, that's different settings for the power for your battery. Vox, the voice operated transmission, is either off or with a sensitivity level, as you can see, is 0 through 10, and that applies to the ear mic piece that you have that plugs in to the side, just like the microphone did. So you have the ability to turn it on to voice operated if you wish for it to automatically come on when you speak. It also has a PTT button, or a push to talk button, on here if you do not have it set up for the Vox. So the PTT, if you have this in your ear and the mic hanging in front, you just click that in order to talk. Normally you use the PTT button over here, as you can see, that transmitted, in order to talk, or the PTT button on your handset. So that's how you talk with it. The next menu is a selection between a wide and narrow band, and you can see the settings. Display illumination. You can have the level of light, either to illuminate, as you've noticed when we've been pushing the buttons here, the light has come on the face of it, and you have different settings for how bright it is. TDR is dual watch or dual reception. As I stated before, there are those two channels. It can watch two channels at once, depending upon which two you want as to what you'll set them at, and setting that will allow you to receive transmission for both. And it's a bit tricky to get used to, but it can be very convenient. Now, get this thing to sit flat here. Okay. Menu 8 is the beep. The keypad beep. As you know, when we push the buttons, it makes the beep. The TOT, transmission timer, is a setting for how many seconds you talk before it cuts you off. It is several reasons why they put a limiting factor for your length of time for talking, but there is your option to change that. I've set mine at the longest or highest amount of time for me to have as much time and room. Okay, number 10, reception digital coded squelch. You're not going to need to mess with or set these unless you're using the ham frequencies, and a ham operator should know how to set these per the frequency they're using. But menu 10, 11, 12, 13 will allow you to change those settings for the coded squelch. Too much to get into now, not necessary for basic, but ham users, you know what to do with that. 14 is for the voice prompt, that's the on-off. The automatic number identification of a radio can be set through the software for number 15. It is not something that you're going to need, but you can program radios to recognize each other based on that. Same with the menu number 16 and 17 and 18. Those are all settings that would be used if you're using ham frequencies. 19 is a PTT ID. That is a signal that's transmitted when you push to talk, so that if you wish to set it up so two radios recognize each other but no others, and no other radios can interfere with a conversation, it is a kind of a privacy type setting. PTTLT is a limiting code for time for push to talk for the signal. The menus for 21 and 22 are for your display. You typically will want to have the channel, or excuse me, not the channel, but the name for the display. That way it's easy for you to recognize. Let's go in here back to chirp. Okay, so you have your frequency and your name, and of course you have the channel as it's under the location number. You're going to want the name so that you have more characters for recognizing that frequency. You can have it set up for the channel number, but the easiest thing for me has been the name as opposed to the frequency. I don't want to have to remember all the different numbers as to which one is which which frequency is which channel. We will skip through 26, 27, and 28. That's for programming purposes. Or excuse me, 26 is for offset frequency communication. This allows through ham to offset the frequency when using a repeater. Not necessary in our case because we were transmitting via simplex, which means we're just talking back and forth on the same frequency and not another side-by-side frequency. 29, 30, and 31 have to do with the colors of your display, depending upon whether you're transmitting, standby, or receiving. As you see, you have the ability to change those. Not a big deal to leave the way it is. You have alarm mode. Look under the subsection for the description. Band selection is the UHF VHF if you're in frequency mode. This is a dual frequency transmitter receiver, which means we use VHF and UHF, and of course it does have the ability to receive FM radio as well. We'll show you that in a second. Tail tone elimination. That's a tone that's transmitted for the repeaters to let the repeater know that you've stopped transmitting. The other real significant menu here you'll want, like I said, most of these have to do with things that you're going to use if you're a ham operator. We're not going to do that. We're going to use it for the public frequencies. But the Roger beep menu number 31 is something that some of us find, I would say, annoying that it's transmitted. And if you're ever wishing to have a quiet conversation where you're in control of the volume of it between you and the recipient, you do not want the Roger beep on, as it will be an extra noise indicator of you being around. Somebody could hear that if you were trying to keep your voice down. So it's good if you're just carrying on conversations to let you know the other person has stopped transmitting. But if you're wanting a quiet conversation and you don't want others to hear you, then you don't want the Roger beep on. Of course, 40 is reset and restoring the default settings. And you just go through the menu with that. So that is most of the menus. Like I said, hams will know what to do with most of those settings. Most people will not need to use those. The main functions are going to be the simplest ones, changing the menus that we just talked about, and setting the frequencies where you will be able to use them until sometime in the future where it may be necessary to use other frequencies. For now, we're using these as fancier, I should say, radios for the same purpose as you would with the bubble pack radios. All right, a few other features that we have that you may wish to use, and I use them frequently. This button right here on the side where my thumb is for the light. It's very helpful at night. And then you have a strobe for signaling purposes, and that's off. Then you also have this, which is for the alarm. Sure what you would want to use it for. Occasionally some of us hit it and it lets everybody in the world know that you just hit the button wrong, because it can broadcast that alarm. In emergency, I could see where it might be an issue, but you'll have to discuss it with you and your family as to, or your community as to what you might use that purpose for. The other use is a single push of this button. Turns on the radio, which is kind of nice to have. You can then hit the scan button and it will change the channel. There we go. To turn the radio off, a single push turns it off. So for the most part, the main buttons that you're going to use are the lock, to lock the keypad because you don't want to be pushing buttons, the selection buttons, the menu button, the AB button. This button you'll typically leave the frequency or channel mode button shall be left. Occasionally you'll use the light button at night, and the band selection that changes it from VHF to UHF. And then here's the other function. I told you we'd get to it. Let's say you do want to use this as a emergency scanner. Well, we have those frequencies that are set up not to skip, and you can change and select whichever frequencies you want to roll through a scan profile. And what we'll do is we'll move the AB to B, because like I said, I like to leave the upper frequency always monitoring the one that I stay on. And we're going to move it down, and then I'm going to hold the scan button down.
Scanning begin.
And then you see it starts to scroll through all the emergency frequencies that I have programmed in here. And when I'm done, I can stop the scanning, and then I can switch back to my original frequency and maintain my normal communication. Then I would lock the keyboard, and we are now set. Typically you're gonna just be on one frequency to communicate with your family, your friends, your community. That's the basics. I know there's a lot more here, and like I said, many of these menus are applicable to ham usage, but most of you who are using this now who don't have ham licenses are going to be using it just as you would a bubble plaque, with the ability to have future use in case of emergency to monitor other frequencies such as your local ham club frequencies, your local ham emergency frequencies, and or the police, fire, and that kind of thing. So that is something I would suggest you coordinate with somebody who is a ham license in your community. With that, I think we've covered it all. Any other questions, take them to those who you'll be working with for settings. If you're not comfortable with them, I could answer some, but I have a feeling you're going to be better off working within your community to develop those relationships. This is just enough to get the average person through getting some public frequencies on here and using the basic commands that would be necessary. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed what I could provide. Thank you.